That's why Petbo asked me to do it, just to kind of celebrate World Bee Day. I'm Julie White. I'm the president of Petbo, but I'm also the owner operator of Long Point Honey Company, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I've got about an hour, I think, but that includes some time in the bee yard. And the internet is just not being very supportive today. We did a little run through and it was questionable as to whether or not that's going to work. But I do have a PowerPoint. I'm going to go over some things and then we'll take a walk down to where I put a hive. I thought, it's a little closer to the house. And what I was hoping is that we'd be able to illustrate what I'm going to talk about in the PowerPoint. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, and we'll hope that the PowerPoint works as well. So I'm gonna get started. What we're going to do, I think, is I'll do the PowerPoint, and then we'll open it up for questions, and then we'll walk down to the Beeyard and see what happens. If we're not able to see anything, we can keep talking and doing some questions. But otherwise, I think most of the content will probably come from the PowerPoint, unless we're lucky. So let me just share my screen with you on that. Okay, can everybody see that? Can you, if you can't see it, can you let Megan know? We'll take our time with that. Megan, are you hearing anything from people that they can't see it?
No, people can see it.
Okay, great. So Long Point Honey, this is where we're located. So if, just in case we don't get into the bee yard, there's a picture of part of my bee yard, the front part that faces the street. This is most of you will have been to Petbo. I'm about 5 kilometers west of the observatory, so I'm right on the Long Point area there. Okay, why isn't it moving? Okay, so what I'm going to do today, this is not really about bees. So I'm hoping you're not wanting to learn all about bees and what's happening to bees. This is really about beekeeping. So I'm going to talk about how I approach beekeeping and what I do, generally speaking, in the bee yard and why I do it. And then we're going to take a look in the hive, hopefully, and have some Q&As. So I started Long Point Honey in 2010 and then got organic certification in 2011. This was I would say, a retirement business for me, something I've been wanting to do for years, but really wanted to do it in a serious way. And so I was waiting until I retired and really could study it and go after it. I spent a year studying under a professor at the University of Delaware. He was kind of a guru. And then I took a course at Guelph as well, sort of more of a hands-on thing. And then started in 2010. I got my organic certification in 2011, but I did start right off doing organic. So I didn't have to do any kind of a transition year. I was able to, as soon as I got all the paperwork done, able to get certified right away. And I can do that because I'm in a national wildlife area. And so there's no farming, no use of agricultural pesticides. And there are about 26 households here, all of whom have agreed to use non-chemical pesticides and herbicides in their gardens. So I just get a huge amount of support from people here. So I'm running about 20 to 30 colonies. That's about all I can handle. I can handle that many colonies, but the amount of honey that gets produced from that is just more than I really want to deal with. So, so here I am down here. I'm right about there. So I do operate very much from a framework, from an ethical framework, I suppose, or philosophical framework. And that is really about bees first. I think when I started, I was thinking this was going to be about making the most wonderful honey I could. And I still want to make and do make wonderful honey, but somehow it transitioned. So it's really all about the bees. I love being with the bees, and everything I do is to protect them. And there is a philosophy that says you can either choose bees or you can choose honey, because there are different practices you do if you want to prioritize one or the other. So for me, it's definitely bees first, and that will probably emerge as I talk, because one of the things about that is minimum intervention. I know some beekeepers go into their hives every couple of weeks to check the queen and, you know, check various and sundry things. I don't do that. I do a complete inspection in the spring and a complete inspection in the fall. And between those times, I go in only if I need to just check something, you know, make sure that they're getting some honey and make sure that they've still got a queen. But I do it in a very careful and straightforward, simple way. So I don't feel like I need to do that. And I'm going to explain why, because there are other ways of finding out what's going on in the hive besides doing a full inspection, going in and disturbing them. Part of why I wanted to be organic is that I also wanted to have the smallest possible environmental footprint. And you wouldn't think that a beekeeping operation would have a big environmental footprint, but it can. It can if you've got many hives in an area with little forage and they're competing for resources with wild bees, for example. Um, and plus, I think some beekeepers will use more invasive um, chemicals to deal with the varroa mite. And I don't do that. I will talk about treatment, because organic doesn't mean no treatment. It just means treating with organic procedures. So I guess I look at beekeeping in terms of being a balance of science and art. I really do try to follow the science and do what is best possible practices. I've taken courses in biosecurity, for example, but a lot of beekeeping is just intuitive. It's art. It's kind of being in the moment with the bees, and sometimes it's just trial and error too. I mean, I've made some spectacular mistakes doing that, but sometimes there's just not a simple answer. Every hive seems to be a little bit different. Every season seems to be a little bit different. So I guess what I think is, what I try to do is I try to listen to the bees, try to find out what they're feeling, what's going on with them, and that requires me to use all my senses. So I'm listening, I'm feeling the environment, I'm looking, and I'm doing a lot of that before I even go into a hive. So because bees live within a system, right? They're living, you know, so climate change and weather, and whether or not there's been a skunk in the bee yard, or whether there's a drought, or what kind of forage there is, all of that will make a huge difference. So I start by looking at the forage, at the environment that the whole bee yard is in, and then I deal with the bee yard itself. You know, what am I feeling? What am I experiencing there? And then the hive, and then the bee. So I'll go over that more specifically. I start off the morning just taking a little walk. You know, I want to see what's in bloom, see what the bees are foraging on, what the weather's like. The weather has a huge impact on bees. They won't fly if it's colder than 12. I mean, they'll come out, they'll defecate, but they'll go back, but they won't do any significant amount of forage. Plus the plants aren't really producing much nectar at that cold. Um, so if it's cold, if it's rainy, they don't like to fly in the rain. They'll be crabby if it was raining the day before. If there's rain coming, you know, you can feel that kind of agitation. And I make sure that that they've got sources of water. Although I often see them down on the beach. They'll be standing on the rocks, getting water and bringing it back. But I make sure there's water in the bee yard too, so they don't have to go too far. Lately, if it's too bad, I can't bring you in the bee yard, because yesterday I made this thing. It's a little solar fountain, and it just kind of bubbles the water. It has a little platform they can stand on. I have yet to see any bees in it. They may not like it at all, but I thought it'd be a fun try, because you also don't want them to get into the water and drown. So they need to have something that they stand on. So then I go into the bee yard, and I have to say, I have here happy bee yard. I am nowhere as happy as I am in the bee yard. Just walking into the bee yard thrills me. You know, there's an energy and a sound and a smell. I mean, it activates every sense. But I can also tell what's going on just by being in the bee yard too. There's a positive energy and a negative energy. For example, I can walk into a bee yard and get a feel for whether or not somebody's getting ready to swarm. Not always. I can tell sometimes if I walk into a beehive that someone has swarmed. I can't necessarily tell which hive is swarmed, but but the energy of a swarm is phenomenal. I'm not sure if you know what a swarm is, so I'll just say something about that. It's a swarm is a natural way that bees reproduce. So as the hive gets crowded, or if there's a flow on, and so there's starting to be more honey, and there's not enough room for the queen to lay, they will start getting ready to swarm, and they will create with queen cells on the bottom of the frames. So they'll have maybe, no, I've seen 3, I've seen 15 queen cells. They want to make sure that they can replace the queen that goes with the swarm. So when they're finally ready to go, half of the hive will leave with the queen, and it's just awesome. The first time I saw it, I was standing in the bee yard, and I ran in to get my husband and dragged him out. And I said, look at this. It's a miracle of nature. There was 20,000 bees pouring out of the hive with the queen in there somewhere. And the sound was just deafening, and the sky was just filled with them. And I was so excited. Second time I was really excited. Third time I was like, oh no, here's another effing swarm. But now I'm back to it's a miracle of nature. I mean, I think that's part of being focused on bees rather than honey. The concern with swarming for beekeepers is that they take half the honey. You know, they load up with honey and they take it with them until they get relocated and they can start producing their own honey. So they're just loaded up with honey, and so that's a lot of honey gone. But now I just think, well, that's a sign of a strong hive, and there's some things I can do to delay it or prevent it. But for the most part, they're going to do what they're going to do, and I just make sure that they are able to requeen. So that is a time when I will go back within a couple of weeks to see if the queen that hatched out of those queen cells has mated, and whether she's starting to lay eggs, and so the hive can rebuild itself. The mating thing is a lot more challenging than you might think for a queen. And I said I wasn't going to talk about bees, but there's a little bit here I need to say. There are 3 kinds of bees in the hive. One is the queen, and there's one in every hive. 2 is the female workers, and there's generally between 30 and 50,000 of them. And then there's the male drones, and there's maybe 200 of those in a hive. The drones are what mates with the queen. So they go out in the daytime and they hang around in the drone staging area, whatever, waiting for a queen to come by. And when one does come by, she'll mate with 16 to 20 of them, and then she'll go back to the hive and that will be it for her. I mean, she'll have enough sperm to lay eggs for a couple of years, maybe even more. My queens tend to last a long time, but it's problematic because if the weather's too cold and too rainy, she doesn't get out. There's a window that where she's fertile to be fertilized. She can get eaten by a bird. She can get lost coming back. So it isn't guaranteed, even if there's nice fresh virgin queens, that she'll get mated properly. So I do check on that if a hive has have swarmed. So I look at the energy level, activity level. Are there a lot of bees around? Are they defensive to each other? Is there any? Do you see anything going on in the entrance to the hives? Can I smell honey being produced? Even now, I can smell honey in the bee yard, and sometimes I can even tell where they're getting it from. Certain trees will have a particularly unique smell. Certainly in the fall, you can smell the goldenrod for sure. And is there a flow on? Because if there's what that means is that there's enough flowers to provide enough nectar, so that they're definitely bringing in plenty of nectar. So we call that a flow, and that's always a high energy time. You know, all the worker bees are out at that point, bringing in nectar. So I listen to how they sound, whether there's other sounds, you know, just kind of get a feel for the yard as a whole, and whether there's any signs of pests or predators. Often, if there's been a skunk in the yard, you'll see scrambling, you know, claw marks outside the hive. I put my hives up on about a foot high off the ground on a level kind of thing, because the skunks don't like to expose their bellies. So don't generally have a lot of trouble with them. But I did walk into the Beeyard once, and just walked right up, without even seeing it, just walked right up to the skunk. And the two of us just looked at each other, and both of us just backed away. I was like, oh no. But that's not that usual. But other things can go. I mean, some you know, areas have bears. So that can be a terrible problem for hives, because they don't just, you know, put their hand in and grab some bees. They just destroy the whole hive. And so a lot of beekeepers in areas north of here have to put electric fences around. So the most important thing, though, for me is the outside of the hive. You can really tell quite a lot about the outside of a hive. And depending on what's going on there, I will either go in or I won't go into the hive itself. So the first thing I look at is their pollen coming in. I was just out there this morning, and it looks as though the Canada plum trees on the government property next door are starting to bloom. And I can see that they're bringing in some pollen as well as nectar from those flowers. They're still bringing in a little bit of dandelion, but not a lot. Dandelions are pretty well done at this point. But I will say a thing about dandelions, and everybody hates dandelions, but beekeepers, because for us, it's the moment we realize that the hives have made it through the winter, because now they've got things they can be independent and forage on. Dandelion isn't the best nectar. It's not the best pollen either, but it's enough for that first forage for the bees, because up to this point they've had to eat their own honey, and that's obviously good, but they're ready to bring in some more fresh pollen. The pollen is their nectar, is their protein, and the nectar is their carbohydrate. So they do really need that protein. And it's also, the dandelion's a signal to the queen that everything's going to be okay. So she'll start laying more because she'll feel more confident that her brood will survive if there's going to be enough stores. So I look at the level of activity, and this varies from time to time in any hive. This is one reason why people who are starting out in beekeeping should get more than one hive, because you need to be able to compare it and look at this particular hive over time. So I keep a lot of notes about how they're doing, so that I can tell if there's a change, because that's really what you want to look at. Is the population declining or is it growing? If it's growing, that will tell you something about the health of the hive inside. If it's declining, that also tells you quite a bit. But some hives are going to be smaller than other hives. So it's helpful to be able to see the difference between them. So I do look at that. And I do that every day. I go out and take a look and just see what's happening. I try to do it in the morning because the activity level can change over the day too. They generally don't start before 10 o'clock, and depending on whether the sun is on the hive, they may even start a little bit later. And then they'll, so I try to go out when everybody's more active. So late morning rather than early morning. Well, the defecation, that's something I really look at more in the winter to make, because bees won't defecate inside the hive. So it's important that they're able to get out sometime over the winter. So I do check on that. The hygienic behavior, well, what that means is that sometimes the hives will get varroa mites, the bees will get them. They're a pest that attaches it to the bee. It's like if you had a plate-sized parasite on your body. That's what it's like. It's awful, and that's basically what beekeepers treat for, just because it can really, it's a vector for all kinds of viruses and things. So, but now bees are being bred to be more hygienic, so that if a larvae or pupae has a varroa in the cell, the bees will pull it out and they'll take it out and they'll just either fly away with it and throw it away someplace, or they'll leave it on the front stoop. So I look for that. I look to see if they've brought out some larvae or whatever, so that they're trying to minimize the impact of varroa. I don't always see it. It can still be hygienic, and I won't see it because bees will generally not leave stuff on their landing pad for very long. But morning is when I would see it. So when I go out, I look for that in the morning and see if that. I look to see, again, this isn't just the front of the hive, but the hives next to it. Are they coming back and forth? What happens in the hive is that there's a sequence of tasks that bees will do before they start foraging. And one of them is being a guard. And so there will be guards at the entrance, and they will react if a bee from another hive comes in, or something else comes in, like a beekeeper, for example. So I look to see if there's any reaction on the part of the guards of whether bees from another hive are going in to rob them of honey, or whether they're just kind of accidentally drifting in. But it would create some agitation. So I look for some agitation at the front and see if anything's happening there. And then in the afternoon, there's a fun thing that happens around 3 o'clock, where all the newbies who have gone through all their tasks inside the hive, the day before they start to forage, they'll come out, they'll fly out, and they'll turn around and they'll look at the hive so that they can remember it, where it is, what it looks like, and they'll just flap and look and flap and look, and then they'll fly back in. And there's a lot of bees that will do that. I mean, there will be, hundreds of them doing that every day. And that's really fun. There's a huge amount of energy that comes from that, and they're really excited, and they still have lots of energy. They're going to be starting to bring nectar in. So for me, it's that there is a playtime, that there's a lot of them, and that they are, doing what they need to do. So that's what I look at outside the hive, every particular hive, before I would go in. So if there's anything that concerns me, or I just want to take a look, maybe it's a new hive, I just want to see what's happening, or if there's something from the last inspection that I needed to monitor, maybe I was in and then the population looked a little low, or I wasn't completely sure that the queen was was strong enough, or was still there. So I'll make a note. What I did last year and the year before was I put some strips of tape on top of the hive, and then I wrote on it with a Sharpie. so that I had the note right there. And then I would transfer it to my notebook because I keep a lot of notes about what's going on. So if there's anything, I'll go in if there's something that I just want to keep an eye on. I also have on top of my hives, I have like little stone animals. The main purpose is to keep the lids from blowing off, but I'll turn them backwards if there's something I want to take a look at. So I'll go in and I'll open it up and I'll just check whatever it is. But I generally don't go in unless I have a purpose, I have something that I really want to look for. About the queen, I don't generally see the queen. Everybody likes to look at the queen when they go into a hive, but I don't even try because she's, first of all, hard to see and she runs away. And you can just spend a lot of time in a hive looking for the queen when you can see the signs of the queen. So what you can see here is capped brood. So the egg process goes in 3 stages. First, there's an egg. She lays that lasts for 3 days, and then turns into larvae, and that lasts for I think 6 days, and then it gets capped. So under each of these caps is a bee ready to chew its way out. And there's the queen there. But it's a real bonus when I see her. Normally what I look for is eggs. So if I see eggs, I know that she's been active in the last 3 days, and that's good enough. Usually I'll, but I will look at the overall pattern of laying too. There is, I won't go into detail, but there is a healthy look and a look that looks like, nah, she's starting to fail. There'll be holes. It won't be all pattern, solid like this. There'll be kind of lots of she'll skipped around a little bit. But also, if there is no queen, one thing that happens, it's very, if the hive goes queenless for any significant period of time, one of the laying bees will start to, one of the worker bees will start to lay eggs. And then, of course, she's not fertilized. So it will be only drones that she will produce. And so that you'll have a whole hive full of drone brood and no worker bees. And it's just a mess. So I do try to make sure that that doesn't happen, although it has happened to me. And then you have to empty out the whole thing. It's kind of a long story what you do, but it's a mess. So I go in, I take a look. First thing I do though is listen. There's a lot of different sounds that a hive will make. If the hive's gone queenless, for example, there's a definite sound that you can hear. There's also a sound if the hive has gone queenless, but they have a virgin queen. For example, if the hive is swarmed and they've reproduced another queen, but she hasn't been mated yet, she has a piping sound. So I can hear if there's a virgin queen too, or more than, sometimes there's a number of virgin queens. So that's a sound. So I listen for that. And I just check out the population and how many frames they're covering and what the general attitude is. There have been times where whatever, I needed to go in and it had been raining and, the hive was just so crabby and they were just like really defensive and they just kind of chased me out of the Beeyard. So I just kind of do a really quick look in that case, because I just hate that feeling when the bees are like, get out of here, I hate you. So the attitude is good most of the time. Like today, I was just in the Beeyard and they're all so mellow, just wonderful. Smell, that's another thing. So I'm listening, I'm looking, I'm smelling. A hive that's got a problem will smell bad. Sometimes honey can smell bad, but most of the time it's just, and I'm not good enough. My hives are so healthy that I haven't really had any experience in smelling something like foul brood or some serious thing. But if I did smell something really bad in there, I would go back. I would go in and I would really look to see if there's any significant problem, disease or virus or dead bees that are rotting somewhere. I mean, there's things that can go wrong in a hive, but I don't have a lot of experience in that. So then again, I look at the population. Is it going up? Is it going down? And the brood pattern, as I mentioned, and the brood. A hive with no brood there's something going on there. And I will say, this is something that happened this spring. And it was like, you know, when I said earlier that, you know, I make mistakes, this was a big mistake. Um, it was just, for 10 years, I've been putting 50 pounds of honey aside at the end of the season in case the bees need spring feeding, because I don't feed sugar. So I've always had this honey. I've always had honey. And they never needed it. They're always loaded up with honey in the spring. So this year it was so awful in May, and I just didn't want to go in. They, you know, there was a good population outside. They seemed okay. So I didn't go in for probably 2 weeks later than I would normally go in to just see how they are in the spring. So I went in and they had no honey. I mean, they had no honey. And because of that, the queen had also stopped laying. So they had no brood. And I was just so, lots of population though, because she had been very busy and she had laid a lot of eggs and all those had hatched, but then they ate all the honey. So, so I had to do some emergency feeding, and the queens have started laying. So we'll be late. This will be late this year. Oh, it just says my connection is unstable. I hope I'm not frozen on you. So that was a mistake. That will teach me. Unfortunately, I went in soon enough, because without honey, I mean, the dandelions were there, but they don't, if there's no honey, that's more of a supplement than a, you know, replacement for honey. So they could have just starved to death. I mean, you know, if I'd waited another week, they could have starved to death. So that's a big learning thing for me. And, you know, just like, ugh, awful. So I'm looking at pollen too. This I do actually outside as well as inside, but they you can see here they put the pollen into the cone comb like that, and you can tell whether or not they have a nice diversity of pollen. With bees, it's really important, like with humans, to get a variety of food. So, you know, if worst comes to worst, they can, you know, they can have all canola or something if you're in Alberta. But I really look to make sure that they're getting a diversity of pollen, because it's much, much healthier. Nutrition is very important for bees. And I think, you know, a lot of beekeepers who are in farm areas and who are dealing with monoculture, I think that they do have some, on the top of the pesticide issue, the food itself, I think, is a problem. And a lot of them will supplement with sugar. So I look at the pollen and see if they've got a variety. I look to see if there's a lot of propolis or extra comb being built. I do look for that. I don't know why I look for that though, to be honest, because propolis is a sticky substance that they make to seal up holes in the hive, and just, you know, they'll put it sometimes on the queen excluder, but it's not a bad sign. I don't think. And comb, I don't really take excess comb off unless it's really in the way of being the lid on or something like that. But I do check for queen cells, swarm cells. Some beekeepers will move them. They'll just take all the swarm cells off, and they'll think that that will keep, if they're going to swarm, they're going to swarm. And if you take all the swarm cells off, it leaves them without a queen. So I just leave them. But if there's a lot of them, I'll often take a couple and make another hive out of it, because I'll take some brood, I'll take the queen cell, I'll take some bees and put it in a new hive. And that's actually how I get a lot of my hive. So I look for signs of disease. You can't really tell varroa just by looking at them, but you can tell a little bit about how they are acting, whether or not that's a problem. But I do check frequently with a sticky board, and I won't go into that. And a number of drones. Again, some beekeepers destroy drone comb. I trust the bees to make as many drones as they think they need. If there's so many drones that I think that there's a laying worker, that's a different thing. So I check to see if there's anything to monitor, anything I need to any actions I need to take. Um, and, uh, and then I keep a lot of records, as I said. I have a whiteboard. I have notebooks. Sometimes I write stuff on the hive. And I just want to figure out how old the queen is where I got it, that kind of thing. So that's it. That's pretty much an overview of a kind of a day of what I do in any given day in the bee yard. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Megan is going to handle that. I think you need to do it through the chat thing, and
Oh, it looks like Julie's internet just went out, so we will give it a couple of seconds. There she is. If you have any questions for Julie, feel free to put them in the chat box. Hi, Julie.
hi.
Yeah, so like I said, go ahead and put those questions in the chat box if you have any. Okay. Do you think people appreciate the importance of bees in the terms of pollination?
I think people do actually. For a number of years, I was on the board of the Ontario Beekeepers Association, and we were dealing with the whole issue of neonicotinoids. And I was surprised actually at how many people were aware of the issues and supportive of.
Our internet must be really bad. Just give it a couple seconds.
Sorry, the internet is just terrible out here. Can you hear me?
You're a little bit fuzzy.
Megan, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the answer to the question is I do think people care a lot about bees, and they understand the relationship between bees and food. And that's good. I think maybe there's a little bit less awareness of what's happening with the pesticide issue now than there was a few years ago, but yeah.
Another question from Rosalie. Can you tell the difference in the honey if gathered from flowers or, say, pine trees?
With pollen, I can often tell where it's from, whether it's what the type of flower, and whether that's a plant or a tree. Surprisingly enough, most of the pollen actually does come from trees rather than flowers. Um, so that's a little side issue, but yeah, trees are really important. So not just flowers, trees are really important. I can
How
tell with the
much?
honey though too. That's the other thing. I can taste it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right. How much honey does a hive produce, and how much can you safely remove?
Um, the hive gets the first 75 pounds. So I only take surplus honey. They need about, generally speaking, they need about 60 pounds to get through the winter. And I always leave them 75, and I generally get about 75, sometimes less, but I only take I add the boxes, they're called supers, on top of the hive, and I only take that extra honey. So they always have, except for this year, they always have enough honey to get through the winter, and they get the first honey. I only take the surplus honey, and I do that. I do one harvest a year. I do that at the beginning of August. And then whatever they get after that too, they just top that up into their own hive. They're usually just packed with honey by the time winter comes. I don't do any surplus feeding.
And another question, what kind of bees do you have and why did you choose them?
I have a mix of bees. I'm more concerned about the queen, and there's a queen breeder that I really like, and so I use her queens. But I have used other queens too. So I think personally, I think it's good to have a diversity of bees in Beeyard. So I don't focus on buckfast or any this particular kind of bee. I'm more concerned about the quality of the queen that I get.
Just give it a couple more seconds just to see if anyone has any last minute questions. If you have any last minute questions, put them in the chat box. No more questions? Okay, no more questions, Julie. Oh, one more question.
Okay, well,
sorry.
I'm going to log out here and log back on. Okay.
Sorry. In this pandemic time, what does biosecurity mean?
Well, the biosecurity really of a Beeyard doesn't have anything to do with a pandemic. It really has to do with making sure your bees don't have any kind of disease or virus, and that nothing it gets moved from hive to hive. So it's keeping my equipment really clean. It's monitoring for any kind of disease. It's testing for varroa. I scorch my boxes before I put them onto another hive. I mean, there's many things you can do to make sure that if there is a problem in a hive, that it doesn't go to another hive. But it doesn't have anything to do with the pandemic. It's just about good hygienic practice with bees.
Okay, and we don't have any more questions for that.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna log off the computer and onto my iPad, and then we're gonna try walking to the Beeyard and see if we can do an inspection. I'd really like to show you exactly firsthand what it looks like. I'm not that confident, but let's give it a try. If it doesn't work, I'll walk back to the house and we'll just wrap it up at that point. Okay, does that work for everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay, so I'm gonna log off here. Okay, now I want to. Okay, so we're gonna. Can you hear me, Megan? Are my earphones connected?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So just walk through the house. This is reality TV. Okay, Megan, just tell me if I start to lose you, because
Okay.
I might not be able to tell from the screen. So this is the way to the Beeyard. There's my storage shed and the honey house is really where it's where things get stored, where I do the extraction, packing, and everything happens there. So are you still with me?
Still with you.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm here. So look at one.
Oh, starting to lose you, Julie.
You can hear them buzzing. You probably can't, but they're
Oh,
coming and going. Yeah,
Julie, you're frozen.
they'll be carrying. Okay. Is that better?
No, you're still frozen.
Oh no. Okay, well, give it a minute. Were you able to get any of the hive?
It's currently frozen on a picture of the hive.
Okay. Let me try LTE, see if that works a little better. We might have to just pack it in.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out, Julie.
Okay, I'm going to go back. We can talk from there. Okay, I'm going to go back to the porch. I'm really sorry. I was hoping to be able to show you firsthand what I was actually talking about. But I will say this, as soon as COVID's over, I'll promise that anybody who's on this can come by and I'll give you a little tour face to face. Okay, are you back, Megan?
Yep.
Okay, so I think
your video is
that's
working.
okay. Well, I'm back in the house. So again, I'm happy to do a personal tour if anybody's interested when things open up again. Just come by and I'll give you a little peek inside a hive. I'm really sorry we weren't able to do that today. Internet, it's been a problem out here all summer. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Megan, to close it off.
All right. Well, thank you, Julie, for talking to us about your beehives. And it is unfortunate that we didn't get to see them, but of course, the internet rules us all, and sometimes it decides it doesn't want to work. But yeah, so hopefully everyone learned some stuff about bees, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you all for coming. It was great. It was really fun to do. Bye-bye.